Welcome to Reality Stories Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know what people see when they look at you? They see what they want to see. They see the surface, the smile, the pretty dress, the woman standing next to a powerful man. And they make assumptions. They think they know your whole story. But let me tell you something. The biggest mistake anyone can make is underestimating a quiet woman. Because sometimes, that quiet woman is just waiting for the right moment to show you exactly who she is. My name is Rachel Foster, and this is the story of how I took down an empire. For 9 years, I lived in Seattle, in one of those stunning waterfront homes you see in magazines. My husband, David Foster, was what everyone called a tech genius. He built a software company from nothing, turned it into something worth over $1 billion. Cloud security solutions, data management systems, all the things that big corporations pay millions for. He was on magazine covers. He gave TED Talks. People looked at him like he was the next big thing. And me? I was his wife. That's what people saw. The woman who showed up to company parties in designer dresses. The one who smiled for photos at charity galas. Mrs. Foster, they'd call me, like I didn't have a first name of my own. But here's what they didn't know. Before I met David, before I became Mrs. Foster, I was Rachel Chun, one of the youngest certified public accountants in Washington state. I specialized in forensic accounting, the kind of work where you dig through numbers and find the truth people are trying to hide. I'd worked on fraud cases, embezzlement investigations, the kind of stuff that puts people in prison. I was good at my job. Really good. I had a corner office, a growing client list, and a reputation for being thorough. Some people called me ruthless. I called it being detail-oriented. David and I met at a tech conference where I was speaking about financial compliance. He was in the audience, and afterward, he came up to me with this smile that could light up a room. We talked for hours. He was brilliant, ambitious, and he seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. Not just polite interest, real interest. 6 months later, he proposed. A year after that, we were married on a beach in Hawaii, with 200 guests and a sunset that looked like something out of a movie. The first few years were good. Really good. We were building a life together. I kept working, even though David's money meant I didn't have to. I loved what I did. I loved the puzzle of it, finding patterns in numbers, uncovering truths hidden in spreadsheets. But somewhere around the 7th year, things started changing. David started working later. Coming home after midnight, sometimes not at all. He'd say he was at the office, dealing with investors, putting out fires. And I believed him because why wouldn't I? I trusted my husband. The conversations got shorter. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at me, that spark that had been there since the beginning, it started fading. He'd look at me like I was an obligation, like I was something on his to-do list he had to check off. I'm trained to notice patterns, to see when numbers don't add up. And my husband's behavior? It wasn't adding up. I tried talking to him about it. Asked him if everything was okay. If we were okay. He'd brush me off, tell me I was being paranoid, that he was just stressed about a new product launch. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me needed to believe that what we had was still real. But that other part of me, the accountant, the investigator, that part knew something was very wrong. Our 9th anniversary fell on a Saturday. David had made reservations at Canlis, this incredibly exclusive restaurant overlooking Lake Union. The kind of place where reservations take months and every table has a view that makes you feel like you're on top of the world. I dressed carefully that night. A navy blue dress he'd once said made my eyes look incredible. Pearl earrings he'd given me for our 5th anniversary. I did my makeup just right. I thought maybe this dinner would fix things. Maybe we'd remember why we fell in love. Maybe I was wrong about everything. I was wrong, all right. Just not in the way I hoped. We were halfway through dinner, making small talk that felt forced, when I saw her walking toward our table. Jessica Williams, his head of operations. I'd met her maybe 3 or 4 times at company events. Young, confident, always dressed like she was about to close a major deal. I'd never liked her, but I'd pushed those feelings away because I trusted David. That was my mistake. She didn't even pretend to be surprised to see us. She walked right up, looked me straight in the eye, and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said she'd already won. "Rachel," she said, and her voice had this sweet, fake quality to it that made my skin crawl. "I'm so sorry to interrupt your anniversary dinner, but honestly, I think it's time we stopped playing games. David and I have been together for over a year now. And between you and me, You're just holding on to something that's already over. He's moved on, sweetheart. You should too. The restaurant went completely silent. I could feel every person in that room staring at us. I looked at David, waiting for him to tell her she was crazy. Waiting for him to defend me, defend our marriage, defend the 9 years we'd built together. He just sat there. He couldn't even look at me. And in that moment, I knew everything I needed to know. That's when I noticed Kevin Park, David's chief financial officer and his best friend since college, sitting at a table near the window. He was watching the whole thing with this amused expression on his face, like this was the best show he'd seen all month. And that's when I realized this wasn't just an affair. This was planned. This was deliberate. They wanted to humiliate me in public, wanted to break me down, wanted me to disappear quietly so they could move forward with whatever life they'd planned. They picked the wrong woman. I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking, but I kept them steady. I picked up my purse, looked at Jessica, then at David, then at Kevin across the room. "Thank you," I said, and my voice came out calmer than I felt. "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are." I looked at David one more time. "You'll be hearing from my attorney." Then I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, even though every step felt like walking through broken glass. I could hear the whispers behind me. I could see people pulling out their phones, recording, texting, posting. By the time I got to my car, I'd probably be trending on social media. The humiliated wife. The woman who got replaced. The one who should have seen it coming. Let them talk. Let them think they knew my story. They had no idea what was about to happen. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't break down. I didn't call my sister or my best friend or anyone who would tell me to take time to process, to heal, to move on. Instead, I went straight to my home office, the one David had set up for me years ago when I was still taking on clients from home. I turned on my computer and I started looking. Over the years, David had given me access to things. Our joint accounts for household expenses. Passwords to various systems for emergencies. He'd added me as an authorized user on several business accounts, said it was easier that way, that he trusted me. And why wouldn't he? I was his wife. I loved him. I'd never use any of that against him. Except now I absolutely would. I started pulling up bank statements. Transaction records. Wire transfers. At first, I was just looking for evidence of the affair. Hotel charges, jewelry purchases, anything I could use in divorce court to prove what he'd done. But then I saw something else. Something that made my accountant brain light up like a Christmas tree. There were transfers that didn't make sense. Payments to consulting firms I'd never heard of. Money moving in patterns that looked designed to be overlooked. Small amounts at first, then bigger. Always to different accounts, always with vague descriptions. I pulled up the company's financial reports, the ones that were publicly filed because Foster Tech was a publicly traded company. I cross-referenced the internal transfers with the public statements. And they didn't match. Not even close. I stayed up all night. Then the next night. Then the night after that. I barely ate. I lived on coffee and the kind of focus that comes when you know you're onto something big. I created spreadsheets. I traced payment patterns. I followed money through 3, 4, sometimes 5 different accounts before I could see where it ended up. And the picture that emerged was crystal clear. David and Kevin weren't just running a tech company. They were running a massive fraud operation. They'd created fake consulting companies. Shell corporations that existed only on paper. They'd invoice Foster Tech for services that were never provided, software development that never happened, security audits that never took place. The money would flow out of the company, get moved through various accounts to make it look legitimate, and then end up in private holdings that David and Kevin controlled. And Jessica? She wasn't just the mistress. She was the one approving these payments. As head of operations, she had the authority to sign off on vendor contracts, to authorize expenditures. She was making it all look legitimate, burying the fake invoices in among hundreds of real ones, counting on the fact that no one was looking closely enough to notice. Over 4 years, they'd stolen more than $50 million. $50 million that belonged to shareholders, to investors, to the company. Money that should have gone into actual business operations, into employee salaries, into growth. They were thieves. And they'd gotten comfortable because they thought no one was watching closely enough to catch them. But someone was watching now. And that someone knew exactly how to read financial statements, how to trace money, how to build a case so solid that no defense attorney in the world could tear it apart. I didn't just have evidence of an affair anymore. I had evidence of securities fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud, and about a dozen other federal crimes. I made copies of everything, encrypted backups, stored them in 3 different secure locations. Then I picked up my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to an old colleague, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on several major fraud cases when I was still practicing. His name was Tom, and he was one of the best in the business. I told him I needed him to look at something. Told him it was sensitive. Told him it was big. When I showed him what I'd found, he actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so blatant, so obvious once you knew what to look for. "Rachel," he said, looking at my spreadsheets, "this is enough to put them away for 20 years. Easy. This isn't just fraud, this is systematic, organized theft. The FBI is going to love this." The second call was to a lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer, not yet. A criminal defense attorney who specialized in white-collar crime. Someone who could guide me through what came next. Someone who could make sure I did everything by the book. Because here's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't emotional. It isn't messy. It's methodical. It's patient. It's so carefully planned that by the time your target realizes what's happening, it's already far too late to stop it. I filed for divorce the following Monday. Kept it simple. Irreconcilable differences. No details. No drama. Just clean and professional. David's lawyer called within hours, offering me a settlement. $3 million and a non-disclosure agreement. Walk away quietly. Don't talk about the affair. Let them move on with their lives. I negotiated a little. Pushed back on some terms. Made it look good. Made it look like I was hurt but practical, like I just wanted it over with. Then I accepted their offer. David actually called me himself when he heard. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, Rachel," he said, like I should be grateful. Like I should thank him for the scraps he was throwing my way while he kept everything else. "Of course," I told him, keeping my voice steady. "I just want to move forward. No point in making this harder than it has to be." I could hear the relief in his voice. He thought he'd won. He thought I was just another woman who'd take the money and disappear because fighting back would be too hard, too public, too painful. He had no idea what I'd been doing for the past 2 weeks. No idea what was about to hit him. While David's lawyers were drawing up our divorce papers, I was putting together something much more important. A detailed report. 43 pages of documentation. Hundreds of flagged transactions, names, dates, account numbers, transaction records, screenshots, everything a federal investigator would need to build an airtight criminal case. I worked with Tom to make sure every detail was accurate. We triple-checked every number, verified every claim, made sure there were no holes, no gaps, nothing a defense attorney could exploit. This wasn't just about being right. This was about being absolutely, undeniably, provably right. Then I contacted the Securities and Exchange Commission. Filed a formal complaint as a shareholder and concerned citizen. Laid out the entire fraud scheme in excruciating detail. I did the same with the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Division. Sent them everything. Every spreadsheet, every bank statement, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. And I coordinated the timing perfectly. My divorce papers were filed on a Wednesday afternoon. My SEC complaint was submitted that same evening. By Thursday morning, federal investigators were reviewing the evidence. By Friday, they'd opened a formal investigation. I didn't have to do anything else but wait. And watch. The raid happened on a Tuesday morning at 9:30. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from 3 different people within an hour. Federal agents showed up at Foster Tech headquarters with warrants. They seized computers, servers, financial records, hard drives. They escorted employees out of conference rooms. They cordoned off entire floors. David's office was photographed by news helicopters as agents carried out box after box of evidence. My phone started ringing at 10. "David." I didn't answer. He called 8 more times. Then Kevin called. Then Jessica. I blocked all 3 of them and made myself breakfast. Finally, David sent a text. Just 3 words. "What did you do?" I replied. "I protected the shareholders. You should try being honest for once." Then I blocked his number. Over the next few days, I watched it all unfold. My lawyers handled all communication with David's side. I was now a cooperating witness with federal investigators, which meant I had full immunity. I wasn't a target of the investigation. I was the person who'd exposed the crime. Kevin was the first one to crack. Faced with 30 years in federal prison, he tried to make a deal. Started talking to prosecutors, gave them even more information, filled in details I hadn't been able to find. He threw David under the bus so fast it would have been funny if the whole situation wasn't so serious. Travis was arrested at his house. The news showed him being walked out in handcuffs, his face pale, looking nothing like the confident executive who'd smirked while watching my marriage explode in that restaurant. Jessica was picked up at her apartment. Money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false financial statements. The charges kept piling up. The morning news showed her with her jacket over her head, being led to a police car. Such a different image from the woman who'd stood in that restaurant and told me my time was over. The board of Foster Tech held an emergency meeting. They voted unanimously to remove David as CEO. The company's stock dropped 40% in 2 days. Investors filed lawsuits. Business partners started distancing themselves. Everything David had built over 15 years started crumbling. And through it all, I stayed quiet. Didn't give interviews. Didn't make statements. Didn't post about it on social media. I just let the facts speak for themselves. The criminal charges came down hard. David was facing 23 years for securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. Kevin was looking at 18 years. Jessica was staring down 15 years for her role in the scheme. All of David's assets were frozen. The waterfront house. The cars. The vacation property in Aspen. The yacht he'd just bought. Everything seized by federal authorities as proceeds from criminal activity. The man who'd been worth over $1 billion was suddenly worth nothing. Actually, less than nothing, because the legal fees alone were going to cost him whatever little he might have left. My divorce settlement? I didn't get the $3 million they'd offered. I got significantly more. Because it turned out that under Washington state law, I was entitled to half of all marital assets acquired during our marriage. And with the help of my attorneys and the federal government, we identified quite a few assets that David had tried to hide. Assets he'd purchased with stolen money, but that were still legally considered marital property until proven otherwise. By the time everything was sorted out, I walked away with enough money to never work another day in my life if I didn't want to. But here's the thing. I love my work. I went back to forensic accounting, started my own firm, and now I specialize in cases just like this one. People who've been stolen from. Companies that suspect fraud. Individuals who need someone to dig through the numbers and find the truth. I help people who've been underestimated. People who've been taken advantage of. People who need someone in their corner who knows how to fight back. Business is good. Turns out there's a lot of demand for someone who can take down white-collar criminals. 3 months after the arrests, I had to go to a preliminary hearing for Jessica's case. I was there as a witness, had to testify about some of the financial records I'd found. I saw her across the courtroom. She looked small, tired. Her hair wasn't styled like it used to be. She was wearing a plain suit instead of the designer clothes she used to favor. She looked like someone who'd had all the confidence knocked out of her. Our eyes met for just a second. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I just held her gaze, and I hoped she understood the message I was sending. You came for the wrong woman. 6 months after everything fell apart, I got a letter. It came to my attorney's office, forwarded from the county jail where David was being held while awaiting trial. My paralegal brought it to me during a meeting. This came for you, she said, setting the envelope on my desk. From David Foster. I looked at that envelope for a long time. Part of me was curious about what he had to say. Part of me thought maybe there'd be an apology, an explanation, something that would help me understand how the man I'd married had become someone I didn't even recognize. But the bigger part of me, the part that had spent the last 6 months rebuilding my life, knew that nothing in that letter would change anything. Whatever David had to say, I didn't need to hear it. I handed the envelope back to my paralegal. Shred it, I said. I'm not interested. She nodded and walked out. I never asked what the letter said. I never wondered if I'd made a mistake by not reading it. Because David had said everything that mattered when he sat in that restaurant and let his mistress humiliate me in front of dozens of people. He'd said everything that mattered when he chose to steal from his own company, from investors who trusted him, from employees who depended on him. He'd said everything that mattered when he assumed I'd just take his settlement offer and disappear quietly. Kevin lost everything too. His career, his reputation, his freedom. The man who'd sat across that restaurant with a smirk on his face while watching my world fall apart learned a hard lesson about loyalty. When the pressure came, when the FBI started asking questions, when he had to choose between protecting his best friend and protecting himself, he chose himself. just like David would have done if the situations were reversed. There's no honor among thieves. That's what they say, right? And it's true. When everything falls apart, everyone runs for themselves. The trial happened in federal court. It took 3 weeks. I had to testify on the second day, spent 4 hours on the stand explaining the financial records, walking the jury through the fraud scheme, showing them exactly how David and Kevin and Jessica had stolen $50 million. David's attorney tried to shake me during cross-examination, suggested I was a scorned wife making things up, implied I had an ulterior motive, questioned my expertise. I stayed calm, answered every question clearly, let the evidence speak for itself. Because the beautiful thing about numbers is they don't lie. You can't argue with bank statements. You can't debate transaction records. The money either moved or it didn't. The companies either existed or they didn't. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, they found all 3 defendants guilty on all counts. David was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Kevin got 17. Jessica got 12. I wasn't in the courtroom when they read the sentences. I didn't need to be there. I'd already moved on. But my attorney called me afterward, told me David had broken down crying when the judge read his sentence. 22 years. He'd be almost 70 when he got out, if he even lived that long. Part of me felt something when I heard that. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not happiness. Just a kind of quiet closure. Like a book finally being closed on a chapter of my life I was ready to leave behind. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I wish I'd just taken the money and walked away. If destroying David's life was really worth it. And my answer is always the same. I didn't destroy David's life. David destroyed David's life. I just made sure he faced consequences for his choices. He chose to steal. He chose to cheat. He chose to humiliate me in public. He chose to underestimate me. All I did was refuse to be a victim. All I did was use the skills I'd spent years developing to find the truth and bring it to light. If David had been faithful, if he'd been honest, if he'd run his company with integrity, I'd still be his wife. We'd still be living in that waterfront house. We'd still be going to charity galas and company parties. But he didn't do those things. He made choices. And choices have consequences. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. Bought a smaller house in a quieter neighborhood. The kind of place where I can sit on the porch in the morning with coffee and watch the sunrise without feeling like I'm performing for anyone. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. Started hiking again, something I used to love but had given up because David thought it was boring. Adopted a rescue dog, a golden retriever mix named Charlie who greets me every day like I'm the best thing that ever happened to him. I threw myself into my work, building a client list of people who needed someone to fight for them. A small business owner who suspected his partner was stealing. A woman who thought her financial advisor was skimming from her accounts. A nonprofit that believed their CFO was embezzling donations. I took every case seriously, treated every client with respect, and used everything I'd learned to get them justice. My reputation grew. People started calling me from other states, asking if I could help with their cases. I had to hire staff, rent a bigger office, turn down work because there was more demand than I could handle. Life moved forward. The scandal faded from the news. People stopped recognizing me at restaurants. The social media posts were buried under newer, more interesting dramas. And slowly, I stopped being the woman whose husband cheated on her, and went back to being Rachel Foster, forensic accountant, business owner, someone who'd taken the worst moment of her life and turned it into something powerful. 2 years after everything happened, I was speaking at a conference for women in finance. The topic was fraud detection in corporate environments, but really, everyone knew why I was there. They wanted to hear the story. They wanted to know how I'd done it. After my presentation, during the Q&A session, a young woman in the back raised her hand. "How did you stay so calm?" she asked. "How did you not just fall apart when you found out about the affair?" I thought about that question for a moment. Thought about that night in the restaurant, walking out with my head high while my world crumbled. Thought about the days afterward, when I could have broken down, could have let the pain consume me. I did fall apart, I said honestly. Just not where anyone could see me. I cried. I felt betrayed. I felt humiliated. All of those feelings were real and valid. I paused, looking around the room at all these women, many of whom had probably faced their own moments of being underestimated, being overlooked, being treated like they didn't matter. But I also made a choice, I continued. I could let those feelings define me, or I could let them fuel me. I could be a victim, or I could be someone who refused to accept what was happening. And once I found evidence of the fraud, it stopped being about my broken heart. It became about doing what was right. Another hand went up. Do you think your husband ever really loved you? That question hurt more than I expected it to. Even after 2 years, even after everything, there was still a part of me that wondered. I think he did once, I said slowly. I think we were real at the beginning, but somewhere along the way he changed. Or maybe I just started seeing who he really was. I don't know if I'll ever have an answer to that question, and I've learned to be okay with not knowing. After the conference, several women came up to thank me. One of them was crying. My husband's been acting strange, she said quietly. Coming home late, being secretive with his phone. I've been telling myself I'm imagining things, that I'm being paranoid. But listening to you, I realize I'm not crazy. I know something's wrong. I gave her my card. Trust your instincts, I told her. You know what you know. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. A few months later, she called me. Her husband had been having an affair with his assistant. But more than that, he'd been hiding assets in preparation for a divorce, moving money into accounts in his mother's name, undervaluing his business interests to reduce what she'd be entitled to in a settlement. We found everything, documented everything. By the time we were done, she walked away with significantly more than she would have if she'd accepted his first offer. She sent me flowers afterward with a note that said, "Thank you for teaching me that being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you let it be one." I kept that note on my desk. Read it whenever I had a hard day. Because here's what I learned from everything that happened. Being underestimated isn't the worst thing in the world. Sometimes it's an advantage. When people think you're just a decorative wife, just someone's arm candy, just a woman who'll cry and accept defeat, they get careless. They don't guard their secrets carefully. They don't cover their tracks as well as they should. They make mistakes. And those mistakes are what bring them down. David made the mistake of thinking I was just Mrs. Foster. That I'd forgotten I was Rachel Foster, a woman who'd built a career on finding financial fraud, who'd learned to be thorough and relentless, who'd developed skills that would eventually be turned against him. Jessica made the mistake of thinking confidence and cruelty were the same thing. That publicly humiliating someone meant you'd won. She didn't realize that public humiliation can motivate someone to dig deeper, fight harder, refuse to give up. Kevin made the mistake of thinking loyalty mattered more than self-preservation. He smirked while watching my marriage fall apart, never imagining that someday he'd be the one facing federal charges, cutting deals to save himself. They all made the same fundamental error. They saw what they wanted to see and assumed that was all there was to see. I think about that night at the restaurant sometimes. That moment when Jessica said, "Your time is over, sweetheart," with such absolute certainty, such complete confidence that she'd won. She thought she was talking to a woman who'd been defeated. Someone who'd walk away quietly because fighting back would be too hard, too messy, too public. She didn't realize she was talking to someone who'd spent years learning how to build cases that couldn't be torn apart. Someone who knew how to be patient, how to be strategic, how to turn evidence into justice. I didn't destroy them out of anger, though I was angry. I didn't do it for revenge, though watching them face consequences was satisfying. I did it because what they were doing was wrong.